So hello and welcome to today's education webinar with the Black Home Initiative. The Washington REALTORS DEI Committee, during their last meeting in January, has partnered with the Black Home Initiative, a local effort to increase the number of BIPOC households who successfully secure home ownership. The Black Home Initiative is centered around a shared priority of making home ownership possible for 1,500 low to moderate income Black households in South Seattle, South King County, and North King County in the next 5 years. We have three wonderful representatives from the Black Home Initiative with us here today: Anna Boone, Daryl Smith, and Gregory Davis. All have very extensive and impressive biographies, and I've only picked bits and pieces from each to share with you today to save time. So first, let's start with Anna Boone. Anna leads government relations and public affairs for Zillow across the Western U.S. She works with policymakers, associations, and community partners to advance Zillow's mission of giving people the power to unlock life's next chapter. And then we have Daryl Smith, who is Executive Director of Home Site Community Development, CDFI, and a core team member of the Black Home Initiative Network. Daryl Smith has built a long history of experience in the arenas of real estate brokerages, neighborhoods, revitalization, government, workforce development for young adults, and place-based community development. And lastly, we have Gregory Davis, a veteran neighborhood development practitioner, 30 plus years, and a diplomatic, poised observer. Davis manages strategy for the Rainier Beach Action Coalition. And the Rainier Beach Act Coalition stewards the Rainier Beach Neighborhood Plan and is focused on neighborhood engagement and empowerment. If you want to learn more about all these three speakers, I have all of their extensive biographies, and I'm happy to give those to you. But I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Daryl to start off today's webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you very, very much for the introduction, and appreciate the welcome from all of you. It's really good to be here. It's never a bad day to talk about the Black Home Initiative, an effort that's really come together over the last year. And little point of privilege, it's good for me to be here as well, because once upon a time, I was a realtor for 15 years with the Windermere Real Estate, the Mount Baker office right here in Southeast Seattle, not far from where I live. And so it's good to be among you again. And I'm especially gratified because as we talk about this effort, we all have to acknowledge that real estate, my former profession, I am in the lending world now, but real estate had a real distinct role in why we need the Black Home Initiative. As we know, or perhaps a few of you may know, the disparity in home ownership rates for people of color in Washington State, and African Americans in particularly, is staggeringly huge. It's about half of white community members. And in fact, in Washington State right now, about 40% of Black households actually have zero wealth. And so the Black Home Initiative, as Liz was talking about from one of our pieces, is really an effort to bring together a network, a new network that will be a little different, and we'll talk about that in a few moments, to really supercharge an effort to find, recruit, stand up, walk alongside 1,500 new Black homeowners in the course of 3 to 5 years, and everything that needs to happen in order for that shared goal, that shared priority to happen. So with that, Marty Coistra is here. Marty is staff to the Black Home Initiative. We wanted to go through a few of the slides and leave rooms for questions as well. And so first up, I believe it's Anna is going to walk us through a couple of slides here. So it's just awesome to be with colleagues like Anna and Greg, who I've known for many years, really sharing in this effort. So Anna, to you.
Yeah, I think it's actually Gregory on this first one.
Gregory's up first. Okay, Gregory, you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. And I saw someone put in the chat, Liz, that the recording wasn't on anymore. So I just wanted to double check that, because I want my voice recorded.
Yes, the recording is working, and
everybody
is able to hear. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And so I'm here to kind of get us started and talk a little bit about some background in terms of this Black Home Initiative. And then I'll be followed by Anna and Daryl. Where's kind of rotating through the slide. So you'll hear three different voices, and you'll get three different kind of perspectives on the work. But as you can see, this first slide, it asks the question, how did we get here? Now, we've got organizations like Washington Roundtable, Washington Bankers Association, Center for Community Investment, Civic Commons, Housing Washington, all in the initial phases of this work really kind of coming together. So, as Daryl mentioned, it started about 23 months ago with just exploring the concept of a Black Home Initiative. And shortly after that, we were able to launch the development of a 7-point plan to increase home ownership. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. The Center for Community Investment selected Civic Commons to kind of launch a 3-year effort in the greater Seattle area. And, we did have to extend our geographic location outside of Seattle because the housing stock in Seattle just wouldn't allow us to fulfill the mission that we got with the 1,500 homes. Then we formed this core team, and you've got 3 members of the core team here. We've got other folks like Andrea Copain with Birdwalk Place, Gordon McHenry with United Way. Probably shouldn't have started listing names because I knew I was going to miss somebody. But anyway, those are some of the folks we got. And then, Housing Washington released this 7-point plan in October. And then a formal announcement was made that for the investment in the initiative. And we're actually joining 5 other cities in the country in this work: New Orleans, Chicago, Los Angeles, Miami. I know I'm missing some, but those are, so this is kind of a national effort being supported. If you can go to the next slide, Marty, appreciate it. So essentially, we're talking about this initial plan, the Black Home Initiative, implementing the 7-point plan in South Seattle, South King County, North Pierce County. And it is to increase Black home ownership in the Puget Sound region. And the next slide is going to kind of share some information about, why that's necessary. And I'm glad to hear this is an education session. So, and I'm pretty sure these slides are going to be made available to you. So feel free to get those and use them for your knowledge and benefit, especially with your colleagues. So you can see we've got home ownership rate chart here. And you can see that people of color are lower on that chart. We've got home ownership income levels chart here. And then we've got a chart that talks about the disparities in net worth. All things that we all should take some personal stock in trying to impact because they are not at levels that are kind of be in line of that, like what our country is portending to be about. And so that's why these slides really talk about the importance of this initiative. Just wanted to be able to introduce that. So I'm going to ask Anna to kind of step in and.
Yeah, thank you, Gregory. And we can move to the next slide. I think it's so important to ground us in why we're doing this and what we're really trying to move the needle on. I'm going to talk a little bit more about, what Black Home Initiative is and how we're trying to do things differently through this effort. So the Black Home Initiative is part of Connecting Capital and Community, the 3C effort, which is a national project of the Center for Community Investment focused on targeting racial inequities at the core of the housing ecosystem. The initiative had initial seed funding from JP Morgan Chase, and as was mentioned previously, is focused on 6 cities, really working to apply what CCI is calling the capital absorption framework. We'll talk a little bit more about. And, important to this effort is this convening and network weaving really across sectors. And we are so grateful that the Washington Realtors joined as a network partner in this effort. The next slide, Marty. So the capital absorption framework is really focused on these 3 core areas. The first is really defining a shared priority. So this is the North Star that is guiding the work of all of us. Um, and as you'll see here, there are two parts here. So the aspiration of how we're using investment to bring racial equity to the community, as well as making sure this aspiration reflects the values of the people who live and work in this place. And so it's very important that we have that diversity of voices and perspectives informing the work that we are doing. The capital absorption framework also focuses on the pipeline, so a set of deals and projects to help achieve that shared priority. For BHI, this is both looking at supply and demand. How are we preparing future homeowners? And then how are we making sure that that housing stock exists to create those affordable home ownership options? And then last is the enabling environment. So this is kind of all the external factors that impact our ability to do this work. So that can be policies, institutional practices, funding sources, other resources, relationships, the community's kind of understanding of, the history and where we can go. I'm focused, as Liz mentioned in my intro, I'm managed government affairs for Zillow, and so I'm really focused on the policy framework and what we can achieve through the underlying policy environment. And I worked really closely with Nathan and the team at the Realtors on some of those policy levers that we have in front of us in Olympia right now. We can move to the next slide. So we'll drill down a little bit into what that shared priority and what these goals are for BHI. I'm going to try not to read all the words on this slide, but touch on the high points. Some of them have been mentioned. But really, when we look at that provisional result, it's the opportunity to own a home and the generational wealth building that can create, with a focus on making that available to low and moderate income Black households. We've mentioned that geographic area of focus at South Seattle, South King County, North Pierce County, and really looking at how do we measure this, right? Those number of new Black homeowners who have those affordable mortgages and safe, healthy homes. With the ultimate impact being a reduction in the racial inequity that currently exists. We can move to the next slide. And so we drill down on, what does this mean in numbers? What do we hope to achieve through Black Home Initiative? We'll start 10 years from now, 3,000 new Black low to moderate income homeowners. In 5 years, this is the goal that, Liz held up, 1,500 new first-time Black LMI homeowners. We've also been really mindful and acknowledging that we want to continue to support and sustain those existing buyers and homeowners, right? We don't want to slide backwards in our aspiration to also get new homeowners. And as we think about the network, I guess really looking at 2024, given that we've been in this work for several months now, that we have our network aligned, that we are making impact, that we have that shared priority and those outcomes identified, that we are developing new products and programs, that we have a policy framework mapped out that's going to enable that shared vision, that we're getting some policy wins on the board that will help us make progress here. That we're, again, also making sure those strategies to sustain existing buyers are in place. And then what we've done, since this launch, as Gregory gave us a bit of a history, is we do have that team of a core team and full team members in place to really provide that strategic guidance on what we're doing and how we're going to get there, through the connections to community, through the trusting relationships, and by all being at the table with one kind of shared priority and goal. I will pass it, I think, back over to Daryl.
Thank you, Anna. And so it's been mentioned a couple of times of who is making up this core team, this sort of set of advisors that are really, kind of the backboard as well as, the forward push behind all of this. There are some pretty amazing partners that I get to work with on a weekly basis. Andrea Copain was mentioned of Bird Bar Place, Gregory Davis, of course, Anna Boone here with me. We also have Michelle Merriweather from the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, who is brilliant. If you don't know Anna, you ought to get to know her. And then because the initiative really is focused beyond just Seattle, Gregory mentioned earlier that, Those of you who work in the Seattle market, we know it can be a challenging market. And clearly the Black Home Initiative had to look a little wider, obviously, than the city. So you see Felicia Meldon mentioned here as well as a core team member with the housing division of the city of Tacoma. The initiative really is looking from South Seattle all the way to northern Pierce County, and it's very important for us. I did see in the chat someone had mentioned, what about Clark County? Well, many of the tools that we hope are developed from the initiative that will affect Black households in terms of their ability to become owners, purchasers, the tools would be applicable even outside of the geographic area, is my thinking, particularly in the policy arena, because obviously things that will be enacted at the legislature have implications beyond our geographic area of focus. But in order to really achieve those numbers, you do have to find a way to focus up. And so the core team members are really holding that and making sure that we have that line of sight, and we're sticking to everything that we've said in terms of following that 7-point plan. So next slide there, Marty, please. So at this point, we often get this question. So we always look for an interesting slide. What's different? What's going to be different about this? How are we going to get there, right? And so it is different. And a few of you on this call have probably been at the real estate game for a while. A few of us have been in the real estate game, out of it, in government, all sorts of arenas, community development, grassroots neighborhood work. How is this going to be different? It's going to be different, and I feel it is different because of what the next slide talks about. We're taking a real comprehensive approach to this really difficult problem that has been around for a while. We're not, unfortunately, the data is showing us that in many instances, we are going the wrong direction in terms of homeownership for Black households in the Puget Sound region. The numbers are staggering. Gregory went over those early slides, and I would encourage you to take a look at them. There's also, last year, the report was released from the Washington State Housing, was enacted by the legislature, but the disparity report on home ownership for residents here in Washington State gives tons of details and suggestions about how we got here and how wide the gap is. So how is it going to be different? This slide looks at BHI's issue trees, and they're really broken down into 3 areas. We focus on supply, demand, and the enabling environment, as Anna talked about. So the first piece on supply is, in order to reach that shared goal, we got to create a lot more housing. I mean, that's pretty clear, right? And so we have to increase the supply of affordable homes that can be purchased. That means a few things: buildable land, increasing funding, a diversity of the types of production. So BHI is very much working, as you see broken down in these areas here, on all of those areas. So we've got work groups that correspond to each of these spots, essentially on the right-hand side of your slide, that are really working and pushing these arenas, because we know we have to produce a lot more housing, in different types of housing in the right places, looking for opportunities, whether it be in transit centers, density where it makes sense to do so, multifamily housing, and different styles of housing that are going to fit different family needs and desires. So that's one piece. We know also that on the demand side of things, a lot of work has to be done. We have to increase the number of new mortgage-ready Black households and sustain them as well. That's part of this work too. So we need to really improve our outreach and our support for those potential homeowners. We need to improve lending practices and the products available. So a lot of work is being spent in that arena. I certainly spend some time there as well, among great colleagues that are looking at all of the things, again, on the right-hand side of this slide. So outreach initiatives to the community. We need a much better coordinated intake and assessment. We want to be able to capture folks, if you will, no matter where they're at in the journey, walk alongside to make sure they have the right supports, all of the right information, and frankly, the ability to sit down with someone who can really help them with the process and make sure that they are ready with the right type of loan product, right? And that's even going to get into some the occasional sort of, areas that might be a little bit uncomfortable. We need to take a look at underwriting requirements and have loan officers be at the table to really talk about how we can get more creative to make sure we are meeting the need of getting those folks buyer ready. We also think about, it's my dog in the background, sorry, debt remediation, IDAs, down payment assistance. All of these areas need to be creative. We need to really, jumpstart all of our efforts in order to meet the need to finding all of these homeowners. And finally, we need to really increase our community engagement and align our actions. So that means going where the folks are. We need to increase help and work, I saw in the chat, for Black-led developers. There's a big effort at BHI to increase the capacity and the ability for Black-led organizations, particularly folks that are developing housing, to be successful. We need to talk to philanthropy and make sure philanthropy understands what BHI is all about and that they can collectively support this effort. So there's a lot of things going on the right-hand side here. So that launching and funding capacity building initiatives, changing the funding system. The long story short here is, if we just continue doing what we've done in the past, and there are a lot of great organizations that are working in these efforts and have been for some years, but the numbers don't lie. The disparity is there for all to see. So we have to do something different collectively if we want to really get to this goal of increasing Black homeownership in the Puget Sound. Why should we do this? Because it's my feeling, I think shared among many of us, that if we can figure this out for the group that has the largest disparity, there are probably some really positive spillover effects for the wider community as well. We need to really focus on Black homeownership because we will figure out some things that will make a difference for many other folks. And if I think about it, it really, if you think about what is the result of all of this, right? You think about how many college educations were not paid for because we did not have as many Black families that own their homes. How many small businesses that would be successful today were not started because of these gaps in homeownership? How many families couldn't survive a catastrophic medical emergency because they weren't homeowners? I know the realtors get this. You know how important housing is in the ecosystem, but it's important to remind folks that we're missing something. The community would be stronger if we did not experience the gaps we have today. So this comprehensive focus is how this effort will be different. And we can go to the next slide, Marty. And that's it for me. So I'm kicking it back to a colleague for the next section.
Yeah, thanks, Daryl. I'll pick it up from here. I actually love that last slide, and it's the kind of slide that is you put a magnet on it and put it on your refrigerator. Actually, I stick it under my pillow at night and kind of do osmosis on it because it just captures everything that you can see. We got smart people at this. We put a lot of thought into this, and yeah, really excited about it. But the thing is that it does take some guts. It takes some stamina. It takes some intention, and that's something that we figured out. So this slide here talks about home ownership is not an event, and I know you all know that because you are realtors. You're on the ground. You're interacting with folks from the beginning to the end, and because it's not an event, and it's a journey, is why we need folks in this work with some guts and some stamina and some intention. It's not just the smart people that we're going to be able to rely on to make this work. And I would like to put a concept out there to you for a little research on your own that Daryl mentioned, and it's called the curb cut effect. And it's when you support the most disadvantaged and you support them effectively, everyone is going to wind up benefiting from that. And it's kind of an associated term called universal targetism and target universalism. And it kind of operates on the same principle. So we're really convinced that the success of this, being able to win at this, is going to wind up having a broader impact in our region. And then that's what this next slide is about the steps to success. We got 5 steps. It's probably 15, probably 20, but we kind of boiled it down to 5. And we put the word in here, success, intentionally, and knowing that these are the elements that are going to make this effort successful. And I feel almost sheepish in sharing this with you because it's like preaching to the choir. You know this. You know we gotta do outreach and education. We got to provide a safety net for foreclosure prevention because of the experiences we've had in the last economic cycle. So we just wanted to share these to kind of bring home the point about the elements that we're engaged in that's going to contribute to the eventual success of this. And so we're glad that the Washington Realtors have signed on to this. So you'll be able to be part of the group just to join everybody in celebration once we kind of reach these goals of 1,500 homes in the next 5 years. Anna?
Yeah, and I think this next slide kind of puts a finer point on what Gregory just shared, but getting potential homeowners ready and putting them on that path is going to be crucial. I'll note we have the Washington Homeownership Resource Center as part of our team working on the Black Home Initiative, but wanting to make sure that throughout this winding road, we are providing the information, the credit counseling, the debt remediation, the pre-purchase support that homeowners need to get ready to get that mortgage approval. And we can keep moving, Marty, so that we are supporting homeowners potential homeowners wherever they are in their journey. If they're ready next month or if they're ready in 5 years, that we really have strategies to help support them, which leads to the next slide. Yep, that we don't want people to hear no or never, even if that kind of first declination, but the answer is not now. And here's how we are going to get you on the path to homeownership, which is really the opportunity that we have in front of us. I think, Daryl, I'll hand it back to you.
So we need you. We need the Realtors' involvement here. It is fantastic that the Washington Association agreed to come on as a supporter. And we know that you play a really big role in this. And I'm to be honest with you, I'm just super proud. As a former Realtor, I finally did let my license go when I was working in city government. Couldn't keep the clock hours up, but it's really fantastic that the Washington Association came on board. We need your partnership in this work. We need to come together to meet this moment. The time is now. Washington State, frankly, can be a leader nationally in this work. We know this because, as Gregory mentioned, there are 5 other cities that are doing some version of this. And we think we're a little ahead of the pack here. We're a little bit more creative. And here we are in a state that maybe doesn't have the same, population as Florida. But as a region, we can really, demonstrate some creativity and the will to succeed that I think can be inspiring. And we have to do this work. We deserve it. We all deserve it. Frankly, the entire community deserves it. The more homeowners we have, the better. So, if we can change these systems that are frankly long overdue, right, and provide the resources that can help us to close these disparities, we've done an incredible job that I think a lot of us will feel really, really good about, that I was part of this. When you tell your kids and even your grandkids, if you've got them. I don't yet, maybe someday, but this is for me kind of the culmination of my life's work. And the systems do need to be changed. If they did not need to be changed, we wouldn't be talking about the disparities that currently exists. You can really easily with Dr. Google, go ahead and figure out what redlining was all about and what racially restrictive covenants did here in the state of Washington, across the state. This isn't just a Seattle thing. And know that we've got to do some systems change work here. But ultimately, this type of change we're talking about that we've described, that really plays out in the 7-point plan. Some of the things we've touched on here today are how we truly move the needle on this and create a healthier, more economically sustainable Washington State and certainly Puget Sound region. I think that's our last slide, is it not, Marty? Questions? Be happy to take some if there's time for folks on the call here.
While you're thinking of your questions, I just want to also express a more specific thank you to the Realtors for supporting the covenant homeownership account legislation. Having you all on board and behind that is super impactful. If you're not familiar with it, it is creating a state-run special purpose credit program that will direct down payment assistance and closing costs to households who have been impacted by the state's racially restrictive covenants in the past. And it's a really wonderful program. And again, just very grateful to have you all supporting that.
Yeah, that it was incredible to be part of the testimony and have the association represented by some really smart people talking about the need for the passage of this bill. It was really powerful, and who better than the realtors to come out and say, this is something we need to do. And when it passes, fingers crossed it will. We'll be the first in the nation to do this. That makes me feel really proud. I see a hand up from Samantha.
Hi, thank you so much. This is a great presentation. I really am excited to see what we can do. My question is about how to create generational wealth for those Black families that do have home ownership already. Are we looking to address that? Earlier in the presentation, it was mentioned that we know that our Black families, our Black households, don't create the amount of generational wealth as our white counterparts, perhaps. Is there a goal, or is this something that we plan to address as well? Because if we stay in the same communities, are we really going to increase generational wealth, or, not do so much if we stay in the same communities?
It's a really interesting question, Samantha, that you raise. I think two things come to mind for me, and my colleagues to please jump in. But one thing that we've really had to focus on as well, because there's a few of us that are involved in this arena as well, is this anti-foreclosure work, especially on the heels, well, not even on the heels, still in COVID. And as Gregory mentioned, the past downturn, I think in the past downturn, 2008, around the time I stopped being a realtor, the Black community had lost, I forget, it's a staggering number nationally in terms of wealth that had been generated. We can't allow that to happen again. And so that work on anti-foreclosure, and frankly, at the front end on homebuyer education and counseling, is really key to making sure that the wealth that has been gained that you're talking about isn't lost and stays, right? And continues to grow. The other piece that is, I think, part of, what you're talking about here as well is we need to look at things like the appraisal industry. I think that's part of this work as well. I myself, when I was a broker, had to provide my own comps to an appraiser who swore that my house wasn't worth as much because, hey, in this neighborhood, here are the comps, So I kind of had a little mini education for that appraiser. And so we know that, that's an important aspect as well. Value that's associated with homes in communities needs to be looked at. And so it's complicated, but well worth trying to address. And we have folks thinking about that as well. Other colleagues want to jump in with any thoughts on Samantha's question?
Yeah, I'll offer it. It will allow for creativity. Now, we haven't devised the ways completely at this early stage of this. What our work is to build this network and use this impact network as a way to get from the network itself, people in all spectrums of this housing arena, to get the ideas from them. The work that I do in Rainier Beach, one of the things we're talking about is, so when we do get a home, think about a live-work kind of situation. So your house winds up allowing you to earn additional income to increase the possibility, not only just because of the equity, but of intergenerational wealth. I happen to be and I'll be pitching this to the group at some point, privileged enough in a family where I have a mom who has a home in a different state, and a daughter who has a home. And what we're talking about is, can we form an LLC, and if any one of us wants to sell, then this LLC gets the right of first refusal, and it keeps it in our home, keeps it in our family. So, it's going to take creativity. Those are just some ideas. And maybe Anna's got a couple more to kind of add, and maybe some of your other colleagues.
I think it's a great question. Gregory, I love the way that you kind of turned it back, that we are doing this network approach. And so we want to make sure that we're crowdsourcing solutions. But I'll just mention, my mind initially went to the issue of appraisal bias, which has been well documented. It's not a silver bullet. There is a bill in Oregon right now that Zillow is supporting that would require fair housing training and implicit bias training for appraisers, similar to what the real estate industry currently needs to include in their continuing education. So I think folks are starting definitely to think about ways to address this, and looking at diversifying the appraiser industry pool as well. So definitely something that needs to be on the table as a solution as we think about the depth of this issue.
Other questions? I am seeing a few things in the chat as well, but if you want to come off mute or raise your hand, I'd love to engage in dialogue with you. I'm just looking to make sure there wasn't something in the chat there.
Yeah, I think everything in the chat has been.
Quick question. I don't know if I'm off mute.
Yes, sir, you are.
Yeah. Are there any Black developers or developers on this call, on this meeting?
Well, I'm one.
Yeah.
What? Have you developed commercial property or residential previously?
Homesite has, yeah. In our 32-year history, we've created about 300 homes from the Central District down through Southeast Seattle. Our current project we're working on is under the auspices of BHI, and that the units we create are part of the pipeline. We're working on a 68-unit limited equity co-op. There are very few cooperatives in the region. This will be one of the first new cooperatives in the city of Seattle, and the point of entry here is one that we think will serve those buyers that are making about 80% of area median income, permanent, affordable, shared equity housing. So, and there are a bunch of smaller developers, including the Nehemiah project, which is church-based land. A bunch of churches that have come together to say, we've got property. We'd like to act as, in partnership with developer to create units as well. And I know there's also a group of Black developers in the Tacoma area as well that BHI has been working with and reaching out to. And, some of the areas we're looking to try to really help those developers. We're working on a pre-development fund for small developers, Black developers in particular, that would help them to really jumpstart their business to, again, ultimately produce units. Because going back to that shared priority, that goal, in order to get to 1,500, we know we need to produce more units. Market.
Yeah, we need a whole lot more for sale. The problem with the developers is they like to build stuff to rent. It's a lot more profitable. I mean, really long and short. But if we're able to, are we going to have contact? Yeah. How do I get a hold of you? What's our best
shot, Marty? We're pretty easy to find, the three of us, but under the umbrella of BHI, what's the best way to get in touch with us, Marty?
Yeah, thanks, Daryl. I'll pop my email into the chat, so Aaron, you can reach out. And as Daryl said, we can certainly share with you everything that we're doing with Black developers and Black community-based organizations to try to increase their capacity as well. And you
can only sell what you have. You can't sell from an empty bucket.
Well, and the low-income housing tax credit, for those of you, I don't want to get into the details of it, but it, by its very nature, forced there to be local networks focused on multifamily rental. And so it has created a very powerful rental housing machine up and down the West Coast and in other parts of the country. We don't have a corollary to that on the homeownership side. And so Daryl or Ben were one of the few in the trenches trying to scale homeownership product against the forces that are far more powerful as it relates to rental. We don't want to pit the two against each other, right? But we do have to change our focus if we're actually going to get to this wealth creation component.
Yeah, I'm an aggressive sort. Yeah, okay. I've got your email. I will email you if we could get together at some point. Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you, Aaron. There's a question in the chat here from Shenandoah. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correct. What are developers using to determine what type of housing is needed, meaning size, beds, bathroom? Great question, right? That's a great question. And I think, I think all of the different developers, certainly we do the same, is to really, if you're in conversation with community and asking the right types of questions, they'll give you the right answers that you need to go forward. So we know that, family size units are important. We know that different types of housing styles, whether it's, townhomes, multifamily housing and maybe even, single family housing in the right areas. People want all of it, right? And I think people deserve choice. And so in order to, again, get to that shared goal, I think we're going to have lots of different housing types. But I think ultimately you got to ask the question, what are people interested in buying and moving into? And that's going to be different for different individuals and families. So I think you have to address all of it. And I also believe, kind of get into what Aaron was talking about, we've got to produce a lot more units as an ecosystem for ownership. And, my colleagues that do, low to moderate income, affordable rental housing, they do a really good job. We just sort of say it is an ecosystem and we need to pay a lot more attention to home ownership because that's where equity is built. That's where family wealth is built and transferred. That's an incredibly important part of the American, way of being. And we can't ignore that. Robert, your question specifically about cooperative governance, if you would like to email me directly, I can put you in touch with our director of real estate, who's become kind of the local expert in cooperative housing here, especially on the governance side. I'll put my email in here.
While Daryl's doing that, to your question, Robert, what we're learning, especially from the lending community, is there's a sense of there aren't a lot of comparables of limited equity co-ops in this market compared to other parts of the country. And so the lending side of this has been one of the biggest challenges as we try to pivot to more multi-unit structures.
Makes sense. So just to put a finer point on it, I did a lot of work in the New York City market in the past, and there's a long and dirty and ugly history pertaining to discrimination in cooperative housing there. And if there's a trend moving that direction here, there's probably a lot to be learned from what not to do on the East Coast in co-ops. So thank you, Daryl, for the offer. I'd love to learn as much as I can.
Good.
Okay, are there any more questions? So we're ready to wrap up. All right. Okay, well, I want to thank Daryl and Gregory and Anna and Marty and is it Maisha or Maisha? I know she helped me a lot with planning this. For being here today and taking the time. It's always great to you read about this stuff, but it's always great to hear it from the actual source and to, learn the attention behind it. And as Gregory said, the time is now. So we hope this has been beneficial for everybody here. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help. And the recording will be made available on our website in a few days. So I will go ahead and end today's webinar. Thank you all for being here and stay warm.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Yep. Thank you. Bye-bye.